You've done it, maybe more than once. You fell for someone who was completely wrong for you, and you knew it. Maybe not at first, but somewhere along the way, a part of you knew, and you stayed anyway. This isn't a character flaw. This isn't bad luck. This is your brain running a program that was written long before you were old enough to choose who to love. And today, we're going to find out exactly what that program is, and why it keeps picking the wrong person. Love feels like the most personal thing in the world, like it's uniquely yours, your feelings, your choice, your story. But psychologists, neuroscientists, and attachment researchers have spent decades studying love, and what they found is uncomfortable. Most of what you call love is pattern recognition. Your brain isn't looking for the best person, it's looking for the most familiar one. Today we're covering 3 reasons people fall in love with the wrong person, and the last one will make you rethink every relationship you've ever had. When you fall in love, your brain releases a cocktail of chemicals: dopamine, the reward chemical; norepinephrine, which raises your heart rate and sharpens your focus; and phenethylamine, which produces that euphoric, can't stop thinking about them feeling. Here's the problem. These chemicals don't care if the person is good for you. They fire based on novelty, excitement, and unpredictability. Not compatibility, not kindness, not shared values. This is why the person who treats you inconsistently, sometimes warm, sometimes cold, sometimes there, sometimes distant, triggers more dopamine than the person who is consistently kind and present. Inconsistency creates unpredictability. Unpredictability activates the reward system. Your brain reads that activation as passion. In one famous experiment, rats were given a lever that sometimes produced food and sometimes produced nothing. They pressed that lever more obsessively than rats whose lever always worked. Variable rewards create compulsive behavior. And a person who blows hot and cold is the most powerful variable reward system your brain has ever encountered. You don't fall in love with the best person. You fall in love with the most chemically activating one. And those two things are almost never the same. Here's where it gets deeper. Your brain's template for love wasn't formed when you first started dating. It was formed when you were a child. The way your parents or caregivers treated you, their warmth, their distance, their consistency or chaos, became your brain's definition of what love feels like. This is called attachment theory, developed by psychologist John Bowlby in the 1950s. And what it means is this: if love in your childhood felt anxious, you will be drawn to partners who make you feel anxious. If love felt like you had to earn it, you will be drawn to partners you have to earn. If love felt like it could disappear at any moment, you will be drawn to partners who feel like they might leave, not because you want to suffer, but because suffering feels familiar, and familiar feels like home. Psychologist Harville Hendrix calls the person we're unconsciously drawn to the imago, a composite image of the people who shaped us early in life. We don't fall in love with who someone is, we fall in love with who they remind us of. This is why people repeat the same relationship over and over with different people. The faces change. The dynamic stays exactly the same, because they're not choosing a person, they're choosing a feeling that was installed before they had any say in the matter. There's a painful truth that most people never say out loud. We choose partners who match how we feel about ourselves, not who we want to be, who we actually believe we are at our core. If you believe, somewhere deep down, that you are difficult to love, you will choose someone who confirms that belief. If you believe you don't deserve consistency, you'll find someone inconsistent. If you believe relationships require suffering, you'll create the conditions for suffering. Psychologists call this self-concept maintenance. Your brain is constantly trying to keep your external world consistent with your internal beliefs, even when those beliefs are painful, because consistency feels safe, even painful consistency. This is why people with high self-worth tend to leave bad relationships faster. Not because they're less in love, but because the relationship conflicts with how they see themselves. And people with low self-worth tend to stay longer, because the bad treatment confirms what they already believe. Here's the most important thing. This process is almost entirely unconscious. You don't sit down and think, I believe I'm unlovable, so I'll choose someone who treats me badly. It just happens. It feels like chemistry. It feels like love. The fourth mechanism is the most subtle, and possibly the most destructive. When you first fall for someone, you don't fall in love with them. You fall in love with your idea of them. The brain, flooded with dopamine and norepinephrine, fills in every gap with the best possible version of who this person could be. Every ambiguity becomes a virtue. Every red flag becomes a quirk. Every silence becomes mystery. Psychologists call this limerence, an involuntary state of intense romantic obsession where the object of your affection becomes idealized beyond recognition. You're not seeing a person. You're seeing a projection, a character you've written onto them. The relationship trouble begins not when things go wrong, but when reality appears, when the real person starts replacing the projection. And sometimes, often, the real person is nothing like the fantasy, but by that point you're attached. You're in, and leaving feels like loss, even though what you're losing was never entirely real. This is why the early stage of love feels so electric, and why the people we fall hardest for are sometimes people we barely know. The less we know, the more room there is for the fantasy to fill. So here's the uncomfortable conclusion. The heart doesn't choose freely. It chooses based on chemistry that rewards inconsistency, attachment patterns formed in childhood, self-worth beliefs you didn't choose, and fantasies built from almost nothing. None of this means love isn't real. It means love is far more complicated than we pretend it is. The good news is that awareness changes things. Not completely, not immediately, but once you can see the pattern, the familiar pull toward chaos, the chemistry that mistakes excitement for connection, you have something you didn't have before. A moment of choice. Most people go through their entire lives running the same program on repeat, wondering why they keep ending up in the same place. The ones who don't are the ones who stop mistaking familiarity for fate, who learn that the person who feels the most electric isn't always the person who will stay, and that the love worth having is usually the one that doesn't feel like an emergency. 4 forces. Brain chemistry that rewards chaos. Attachment patterns from childhood, self-worth beliefs that shape who you choose, and fantasies built over people you barely know, all running in the background. Every time you fall. Here's your question for today. Looking back at your past relationships, which of these 4 do you think was running the show? Drop it in the comments. I'll be reading them. And if this video made you think of a specific person, well, now you know why.